Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we look for ways we can work together to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ. Today we have with us Faron Thebeau and Josh Chapman. They're in Rolla, Missouri, where they work with the Mosaic Church, and they're doing what they can to reach college students at a nearby university, as well as reach the entire Rolla community with the gospel. And so, Josh and Faron, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on the Better Together podcast.
Thanks for the invitation, Dr. Moody. We look forward to the conversation.
Well, I know our listeners, I'm hoping they've heard the previous podcast. So we've talked about 4 different levels of what we can do to reach international students. And in case this is the first podcast of this series that you're hearing, we want to realize there are almost 1 million international students in the United States. And primarily the first set of those international students are from India and also China. Then you keep on going. They're from nations like Saudi Arabia, South Korea, and especially though, some of them are from countries that we can't usually send missionaries to. And so I think, Faron and Josh, that's why you all have had such a heart for doing what we can to reach international students with the gospel, because it's truly a unique opportunity. Now, what we're going to talk to you about today, we've already talked about how we can engage folks in our first podcast with Kurt Holland. We've talked about ways to interact with people on the university college campus. But I think, guys, you are taking us to another level. You talk about level 5, where churches can get involved with universities, and you're really talking about things that you've done, and we hope to see many more churches on a greater level do. So, Faron and Josh, share with us a bit. What do you mean when you say level 5 engagement with international students?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that is sort of still in development. The first 4 levels that you've previously discussed is something that we have going on in various churches with the Penns out in Illinois, Bradley Mercer, his bunch in Columbia, out in Oregon, Salem, Oregon. We have some going on, but we're looking at the 5th level. And that is, we live almost in what's we would call a reverse diaspora in our day. And that is, whereas the disciples spread out into the world in the book of Acts, we live in a time in which the world is actively coming to us. It's fortuitous that it occurs, and really underneath divine inspiration, that this happens to occur in a time in which those borders have been sealed off to our efforts. When you came into the early days of missions, and Adoniram Judson and Hudson Taylor and those men were going out, the world was open. And they went in and they worked and they labored and they fought to establish the kingdom of God. But those doors are now shut to us. But what we do have is an influx of these students that are coming to the United States, and they're coming in their most formative years. I know it is a matter of discussion among a lot of our pastors and a lot of our parents, the fear they have of sending their children off to college. It seems like we work very hard with children, with youth. We have groups and things at church, but then there's this drop off, and we've lost somewhere in there a generation from the time they leave our homes and by the time they establish their adult lives. That time in college, it seems like we lose them. That's a time of experimentation, of being exposed to different ideas and all of those things. Well, it is also the same for those that are coming around the world. And many of them, as you said, in countries that are closed off to Christianity, closed off to the gospel. They have some preconceived notions of what Christianity is, but they also have an inbuilt curiosity to see whether that really is the way that it is. And so we think that's a time that we can reach them. And if we can do that, what we have coming to us are the best and the brightest students from around the world. Here in the state of Missouri, my children can grow, and I think my children are intelligent. But even if they're on the bottom end of the educational spectrum, they can still get a loan and they can still go to college. Anybody can. But those that are coming here from around the world are leaders, and they're influencers. And they are people that are going to go back and impact their cultures in tremendous ways. And so when we talk about level 5, We're talking about finding a way to reach those students that are coming here, expose them to the gospel in these 4 to 6 years that they may be around, expose them to the gospel, see them converted, disciple them, train them, and see them return as workers in their home fields.
That's exciting. And so what you're saying is it's a way of having missionaries go back, but they already know the culture. They're going to be in places of influence and government. They're going to be in important, working for important companies, influential companies. And so I think I hear you saying is these students that may come to us as lost could go back equipped as wonderful, important leaders in the church and could start churches and influence people, lead people to Christ back in these countries that many of which we can't even go to.
Absolutely. Josh has been very active on the college campus, has made a lot of friends in the time that they've been here, the 5 years they've been here. And some of your friends are in very key places around the world. They are not people that have actively come to Christ at this moment, but they are leaders in their homes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And even if they haven't yet come, I suspect, Josh, what you're seeing is they're learning a lot. They know a lot more about Christianity, and it's possible they'll come to Christ later, based on what they've learned and what they've been exposed to here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah, and that's part of what we're looking at with level 5, Dr. Moody. We're trying to be proactive. So we have somewhere on the order, depending on what the student is, when we meet them, and what their program is. Some of them are here as students, some of them are graduate students, postdoc, some of them are research assistants, teaching assistants, and visiting professors, visiting scholars. But we'll have anywhere on the order of 2, 4, 6 years to work with these students. Now, we have barriers to them being reached with the gospel. Number one, we don't have a base level for them to operate on that we do. I mean, when our kids show up around, they've been exposed in some way to the idea of the gospel. They know who Jesus is. They've been exposed to some church atmosphere, positive or negative. They've been around those things. They've seen Veggie Tales. They've heard about Jonah and the whale and those things. These students coming here don't have that base level to operate from. As a matter of fact, they have preconceived notions that we kind of have to work our way through. For a lot of them, especially in the closed off countries, Christianity has been built as a sort of boogeyman to stay away from. And of course, that gets fed into when they get here. There is a surging movement of intolerance towards fundamental Christian practices and ideas. So those are things that we have against us. And so by the time we begin to work with them, develop a relationship with them, try to expose them to the gospel and lead them to the Lord, some of the frustration that we've had is by the time we do reach them and we see them get saved, they're leaving and going somewhere else. So we're trying to find strategies that we can expedite this process and begin to prepare them and disciple them in a deeper way before they leave.
So our listeners, they've heard about levels 1 through 4, trying to meet up with the international affairs leader on the campus, trying to be there for holidays and invite people into your home and develop relationships with them. But what you're really talking about with level 5 is going to the next level. In other words, some of them have become believers. And so what is it that we can do to enhance them going back and sharing the gospel in these countries? What can we do? What can churches do at level 5, I should say?
Well, I think one of the 4 levels, about any church could step in and be a part of those to one of those extents. But with level 5, what we're really talking about is equipping somebody to be on our campus for us, or in our town, in our community, as a part of our church, and equipped to specifically reach out to those individuals. And so that's not going to be every church. There's only probably going to be a select few that could support somebody doing that. But we know that somebody who's doing that full time and with 100% effort can be much more effective and strategic with what they're doing than a church that's trying to do that as well, or on the side, or is trying to work that into its mission. And so a big thing about being a level 5 church is finding somebody who might fit the bill, fit the description, training and equipping them, and then coming up with the resources in order to support them in reaching out to internationals essentially as a job or as a career. And they've got to be passionate about it, and they've got to be driven, but that can be a very effective resource on our campuses. And so now it's not like we're trying to work in evangelism and discipleship on top of a lot of other duties. We have somebody that can specifically do that themselves, and then also continue to follow up and communicate with those individuals whenever they're gone back to their home countries. So that's kind of the goal with level 5.
Yeah. So Josh, I think what you're saying is like you and Eleanor, that's what you do. You're trying to engage these students on the campus. At the same time, you're not worried, okay, so much about, you're able to concentrate. That's where you're at. You know when spring break is. You're also folks that have become believers. You're teaching them apologetics. You're discipling them in the faith. And so you're saying at the other levels, I can have someone over for a meal. I can spend time with them. But for us to have this kind of turnaround, if you will, in this particular ministry, somebody's got to focus on it completely.
Yeah, this is the dream, Dr. Moody. The way we'd see it laid out, there's 3 steps. I think that we can get us there. Number 1, we need churches that buy in and do steps 1 through 4.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We need people, colleges we need to be active at. The church has existed, we've said many times, downstream of culture. We're constantly reacting. We're surprised all of the time. We come into church and say, can you believe that this is going on in the world? Because we're reacting. This stuff has been going on for a long time. It didn't make it down the pike to us until now. And by the time we react, it's already ingrained. But the college campus is the breeding grounds where the beginning of trends that are going to shape the long-term directions of our world are going on, that affect the culture. So we need to be active in the college campuses. And if we can get, especially working on these international students, I think we will attract some of our local students that are looking for some form, shape of mission that they can be involved in. So that's step 1, getting involved in the first 4 steps, recognizing that there is a need at the college level, that there are international students that are coming from around the world, and we can have an impact, beginning to make relationships, welcoming them into our homes and into our churches.
Let's stop there for just a second, Faron.
Yeah.
And so really, I have to think about this. If I'm a high school student, I'm great at math or engineering, or I'm looking at computer science, and you've had students who have done this there at Mosaic. And so I go to a university. I go to university to learn to be an engineer, but I'm also already thinking of how I might reach some of these international students. And so really, if I'm a high schooler and, I'm looking at engineering, I'm strategic about where I go to school, because I'm going to partner with the church to do these things too, as part of it. So good deal. So sorry, I just wanted to interject that a little bit. Keep going, Faron.
All right. Well, step number 2, then, we look at the short time that we have. We're trying to expedite this. And so the idea is we need to tap into the believers that are already existent on college campuses and begin to equip them to do some of the work continuing forward. We would refer to it sort of in the vein of tent making.
Mm-hmm.
We have, especially in science and technical colleges like the ones that we are located close to, STEM colleges, that's where the international students are coming in. So they're already going to be present. When these international students graduate from Rolla, they're not staying in Rolla. It's 20,000 people here. There's not a future of employment for them that's going to make them the return on investment that they're looking for. They're leaving. We're going to be here. But the students that are coming through college and graduating that have already been Christians, that have already been trained, they're going to end up exactly where these people are, in Kansas City, in Houston, in California. and in Denver, Colorado, where these tech centers are that are growing. So if we can begin to tap into the Christian college students that are there and challenge them, you're not called to be a pastor, you're not called to be a missionary around the world, but you are called to be a disciple maker. You are called to be a witness. And if we can train them to continue while they're in college, and then when they leave to continue to follow on, some of these that we are reaching and are graduating and we lose the daily contact with, they can continue. So step 2 is bringing in the college students and beginning to equip them with things like perspective courses. International Missions has been putting those on, and we try to push our college students. I think we have, Josh, this semester 5 or 6 potentially that are local students that are going to attending perspectives. We've had somewhere on the order of 10 in the last year. And so they gain missionary hearts, and we bring them into discipleship groups, and we teach them how to grow and then how to disciple others. So that's step 2. Then step 3, and this is where the big dream comes in. We're talking a little bit with our colleges and places of higher learning with international missions, and trying to come up with the idea of some training modules that we could put together, whether they're on video or however they're accessible, that are available, that can help expedite the discipleship of some of these students that are being saved as they come to the United States, are going to be heading back home. They're not going to take another 4 years and go to Bible college. They're going home. But if we can give them access to some training in theology, in how to teach, in culture and anthropology and all of those things, we can be apologetics. If we can give them those modules, I think we've got a leg up for beginning to advance the kingdom.
So really, you're talking about, first of all, reaching some of these students. We're also thinking about using existing Christian students on those campuses, and really setting up a training leg for students that would be going to these campuses, but also these students who become Christians, preparing them as they go back to their host country, or their home country, we should say. That's a pretty good plan, an ambitious plan. And many of our listeners are thinking, wow, that's a long way from just speaking in English, or just having someone over for a Thanksgiving meal. But this is really where we need to end up, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. To eat the elephant, you have to take the first bite.
There you go. There you go. And some of these people will stay, some of these international students. You mentioned California, Research Triangle Park, Huntsville, Alabama. All of these places, you can almost look at a map and identify where these tech centers are. Some international students are there, and you mentioned also some of our Christian students who go to these places and do computer science or whatever. They'll end up in those same places, and we have churches in many of those places already. So, wow, it looks like a great plan to me, Faron and Josh, if we can put the hands and feet behind it and the resources and make it work.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm listening. I'm like, I'd like to talk to those guys about that some more. You can reach out to Josh at josh.mosaicrolla@gmail.com and Faron at faron.mosaicrolla@gmail.com. And Josh and Faron, we'd love to have more conversations with the other task force members and talk to you all. You all just have a heart for trying to help and equip our churches to do this.
Yep.
Well,
Definitely.
anything else you all think of before we sign off today?
I will say, and to kind of circle back to a point that you made, unfortunately, like Eleanor and myself don't get to do that solely. Faron and I both wear many hats and involved in the local church, and that's a big part of it. But man, Tyler and Kelly have been, a huge help to us. And so anybody that's listening to this, definitely reach out to them. I know Bradley's going to excel. Reach out to him. I saw the Portels are joining Tyler and Kelly, and that's exciting. And they've got a lot of intercultural experience. So reach out to them. And feel free to reach out to us. You may not end up being the level 5 church that Brother Kurt wanted, where you have somebody there full-time and able to do it. And maybe you have some older people that are retired and want to do it and have a heart for it, and they can do it part-time. But regardless, I think the main point that we want to establish is there is a huge need for this ministry. And no matter where your church can fit, maybe it's just offering some welcome back packets and, hey, we'd love to see you, in our congregation on Sunday. And that's the extent of it. That's great. Or maybe it's having somebody there specifically to reach into the multicultural community in order to spread the gospel around the world. And that's great. But don't think that anything you do, big or small, is insignificant, because it's all with the goal and intention in mind to just plant a seed and then hope and pray and see what the Lord's going to do with that. So,
if I could take one personal appeal on to what Josh touched on there, I know, Dr. Moody, that across our denomination, historically, we're a rural denomination. And maybe there's a lot that are listening to this podcast and thinking, well, I'm not near college. I don't have a large international presence in my town. This is something that's worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not close and you can't do it, your church could take on and put some support towards Tyler and Kelly Penn. You could take some support and put towards Bradley Mercer. And some of these churches that are doing this, as they're growing, make it possible for those missionaries to be on the field, not having to travel all the time, church to church to church every week, trying to raise money. Make it possible for them to be there. We do that for those that are in Spain and that are in Japan and that are in France. And I thank God that we do. We've seen some great fruit coming from our international endeavors there. Let's put some towards this and reach out. Okay, make contact with Tyler, make contact with Bradley, and with the Portels, and see what they might need and see what you can help.
Good job. Well said. And so that's a good challenge, Faron, for especially you're in a rural area. You can help financially. You can also help with those students. So a lot of students that are in rural areas major in ag and life sciences. I think of NC State University, 6,000 international students. A lot of those students were in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. So you can be preparing your students, even though you're in a rural area and you may never encounter a Muslim in your county, but they will encounter them on that campus when they go. And so preparing them with apologetics and helping them to be prepared to share the gospel and to partner with a church like yours to do what they can to impact folks. Guys, I just so appreciate you. And then I'm sorry, Josh, boy, you guys are wearing a lot of hats. You and Miss Eleanor and Faron, you guys are just doing a wonderful job. And I encourage folks to look up another podcast, a guy by the name of JD. So you could go to Better Together. JD, he came out of the Rolla Church. We're just seeing some wonderful things happen from the work, the ministry that you all have, and we hope to see it grow and expand so much more. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Moody.
Thank you.
And we want to thank you, our listeners. One of the things Josh said was every little thing matters. So every little thing we do matters. It makes a difference. So we encourage you to take this podcast, share it with people that might be interested. Think about little things and big things that you might be able to do as well to reach international students, reach people from places in the world where they were not exposed to the gospel. Every little thing counts, and we truly are better when we work together. We're better together. Thank you.